Hercules Tires is the official tire of the Western Athletic Conference, and for over 65 years has been providing tires with unbeatable quality at an unmatched value. Whatever the vehicle and whatever the terrain, Hercules Tires invites you to ride on our strength. For a retailer near you, visit HerculesTires.com.
Welcome back to the WAC podcast. I'm Kendra Sheehan. Eric Danner joining us from Abilene, Texas, and Ben Wilson, play-by-play for the Women's Soccer Championship, also joining us from Abilene, Texas. Thank you so much for being here. Ben, we'll start with you. I mean, quarterfinals in the books. What did you like from the matches that you called yesterday?
I like the fact that it was we made it through day one, our worst weather day by far, and that things are only going to look up from here, which was it's almost like a dual reward for these teams. They start off the tournament, and it was brutal yesterday, mid-40s, pouring rain, basically the whole day leading up to the games. But the teams that win, they kind of get the reward of it's supposed to be like 75 and sunny this weekend, what we're looking forward to. But Kendra, my big takeaway was we knew coming in this would be such a unique conference tournament feel simply because you had two different divisions and a couple of matchups where neither team had faced each other in the regular season, which is just so abnormal for these conference tournaments. You're so used to these teams seeing each other for a third or fourth time. And Lamar and New Mexico State, you talk about in our first game, like completely opposing styles. I don't know that I've ever watched or called a match where one team had 32 shots. And not only did they not score, but they lost 1-0. And it was it kind of made you appreciate just the nature of postseason soccer in any form or fashion, because the margins are so tight, so close, that in a lot of these games that are pretty evenly matched, I think Utah Valley, Sam Houston was the one exception so far to that. Utah Valley just so incredibly good and on all sides of the ball. But I think we'll continue to see this throughout the rest of the tournament, where you get these really tight matchups, and it comes down to who can finish more efficiently in the final third. And it was to watch that in person, seeing a team like New Mexico State just have chance after chance after chance. It is really fascinating when you're calling a game and just seeing these teams go from, all right, we got this, we have all these chances, to, all right, we're starting to run out of time, to the panic setting in. That's kind of what I thought happened at the end of that match. And Lamar, I give credit to them. They weathered the storm, I mean, literally for like a full 90 minutes there.
Ben, I'm just down the hall from you here. If you're watching on YouTube, we're both in Abilene, Texas, and those first round matchups you mentioned, they're two, you couldn't pick more different endings, 1-0 and 6-1. But Lamar being able to withstand all those shots, come away with the victory. And once they got that goal early in the second half against New Mexico State, they did kind of take the air out of the ball a little bit. And Steve Holman, their head coach, such a pedigree. He's been at a lot of Division I schools, Georgia, Mississippi as the head coach. As we've seen this tournament, a lot of Power 5 experience. But Lamar's one of those sneaky teams that you look at their record, maybe doesn't wow you, but they get the job done in generally low-scoring games.
You're exactly right. First off, I see you got the King Suite upgrade. I clearly did.
And the artwork on the wall.
I don't know what's happening here. You couldn't really tell by that. Lamar too. Not only you mentioned the pedigree of Steve Holman, but their final season in the Southland last year, guys, they were up 3-0 in their first match. Blow that lead. They give up 2 goals in the final 3 minutes and lose in overtime to Sam Houston, who's also now in the WAC as well. You kind of think of, man, like, could you have a worse way to lose than that? And how does that impact your program going forward, especially when you have the offseason to think about that and everything? And he was pretty straight with us, he told us we've learned a lot from it. We understand now the importance of finishing. And you just have to think that a loss like that just kind of hardens your team in a way that is really hard to duplicate any way else. And they came in and they never really looked panicked or flustered, even though they were just getting these barrage of shots on them from start to finish from New Mexico State. Having said all that, it'll be so fascinating to see how they match up against a GCU team. You look ahead to the quarterfinal or the semifinal here on Friday night, and GCU comes in with, when you talk about pedigree, Eric, I mean, you come in with the offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year, coach of the year, and a program that has really for the first time had a good taste of success, a team that really hadn't accomplished much of anything until last year when they had a great ending to the season, came up short and lost in the semis in that game to Seattle in a tournament hosted by GCU last year. So for the first time, you get a sense of belief on the GCU side that they really feel they belong amidst the upper echelon in this conference. So I'm really curious to see how that contrast will come with a team who just won a game in Lamar, who's got a lot of belief themselves, but maybe for different reasons.
I want to stay with GCU for just a moment. When you look at their offense, I mean, they have so many players that can score. Brenna Alderson, Cameron Larson, Hannah Edwards coming up from the back and is a threat on those corners. And GCU had lost last year in the semifinals. So obviously coming into this year, it's kind of, a redo of last year. How do you think these two teams are going to match up, especially with the high-powered offense that the Lokes have?
Yeah, and you think too, Kendra, like you would point out the offense, and you think about it on the other side, Lamar, it was 6 goals allowed in their 10 conference games, and then they get the clean sheet in the quarterfinal Wednesday, so make it 6 and 11, which is kind of absurd when you think about it, like how you can be that disciplined. And yeah, we talked with Chris Sistel, and he basically admitted, I mean, we know Lamar is going to be super organized defensively. They'll want to try and counterattack. What's interesting is even though GCU, I mean, the last time everybody saw them, they demolished Utah Valley, defending tournament champions, looked amazing in doing so. They win 6-2, and you kind of think, all right, this is a team clicking on all cylinders. But the coach was telling us earlier when we spoke with him, like, we conceded first in each of our last 2 games. We haven't been getting off to great starts. And I think as much of it is coach speak, at the same time, I think these coaches do want to see some areas where they can improve on and sharpen up coming into a tournament. So we've seen in the past, these teams who have first round byes really, really have tended to struggle. I mean, think about Utah Valley last year, pushed to PKs by New Mexico State and end up not only winning the tournament, but they went around in NCAA. So I think the fact that GCU, while they've ended the year really strong, they've had some blips on the radar, they've had some inconsistencies. I get the sense from their coaching staff, like that's kind of helped them stay focused and prepared, because they took a couple of days to celebrate. That was their first regular season title in their program's history, so they wanted to enjoy it for sure. But I also get the sense that like they'll be locked in, and Lamar at a certain point, you kind of know what you're getting. It's a team that's not very offensively powered, but at the same time, you're going to have to, basically, especially watching like the New Mexico State game, you're going to have to stay patient, not get frustrated if they prevent you from some of those chances. So I think you have to give the edge to GCU just based on the pedigree, based on, as you talk about, Kendra, the immense number of goal scorers they had. But at the same time, you kind of assume this is going to be like a 1-0, 2-1 type of game. Like it's not going to be the sort of runaway we saw like in the Utah Valley game the other night.
Ben, we also had a chance to talk this morning with Tony Manata, the head coach at Stephen F. Austin. He comes to SFA, was the head coach at Iowa State for a number of years, and Colorado guy from Fort Collins, so our conference office in Denver, so not too far from there. Interesting background, and he's a former Marine, and he talked a little bit about how that Marine training comes into play as a women's soccer coach. Yeah,
he did. It's not something you or I can relate to at all. We were, our analyst Mary Kay Morrow was like scribbling notes frantically. I'm just like, yeah, Mary Kay, I don't know what anything he's talking about. I don't, but yeah, the team they've had a really impressive run, and we kind of talk about like GCU from their sense, having the other buy and trying to think, all right, what can we improve on despite the great regular season? I thought it was really interesting, just the mentality that, for the Lumberjacks, they go into the conference season, they start 8-0, and kind of not, I wouldn't say intentionally, but by design, they played more players. They made sure to emphasize the part of just the process and continuing to play better as a team, not really the results. But coach pretty much admitted, like, he didn't really want to go into the tournament 10-0. And it is such a fascinating, like, mental dynamic when you think about it, and how the pressure just ratchets up when you get into these, losing you're out type elimination games in a conference tournament. And he kind of admitted, like, 10-0, it's a really hard thing to go in, run the table in a conference regular season, go into a tournament, and all of a sudden just assume that every break and every bounce is going to go your way. I kind of get the sense of relief almost. They lose their last 2 conference games. They had already won the division, so they had the bye locked up. They get the sense that they're feeling a little healthier. They feel like they were able to work on some things in practice, and it gave their team a sense of, all right, we need to have the renewed focus. Getting Utah Valley is a really tough draw. I mean, as you could say whatever, 3 seed on the overall thing, but as the 2 seed out of that division coming from the West, to get the defending tournament champs who looked so good and bounce back after that 6-2 loss at Grand Canyon, I think they understood going in it would be a really tough test. I also think you normally don't hear teams with first round byes and who start seasons 8-0, Eric, in the conference think about playing with a chip on their shoulder, but they only got 3 players into the all conference team for the WAC. And they kind of took it a little personally. I mean, if you look at it, Kendra, I know you had you did the release the other day. It's like all GCU, it's all Utah Valley, and for good reason. Those players and schools have put up tremendous numbers this year, but SFA, I think they did take it a little personally. They didn't get more recognition for the amazing regular season they had. So I think you're going to see 2 teams, Utah Valley and SFA, who come out. It might be a little chippy. I think they're going to play with. I think the word or at least the phrase that on the SFA side they used was confidence, but not cocky, to say the least. So I think you'll see a really good matchup. That's the one I'm looking forward to the most. If I had to pick between the 2 semis, is that UVU and the SFA match.
Well, I think also in terms of losing those last 2 matches, I mean, you learned so much about your team through losing, and they hadn't experienced that for, 8 prior matches before that. So coming into the tournament, having that adversity, being able to learn, okay, correct these mistakes, that maybe they can make those adjustments. Say if they're down 1-0 at halftime in the semifinals, they have been there before. They, compose themselves after a loss and able to now learn how to get a win. I mean, they only allowed 8 goals in conference play. I think 5 of those came in those last 2 matches.
Right. And you think about too, I think something Eric and I have both learned, especially this week. And, for us who have covered the WAC, we haven't seen a lot of these Texas teams before. And it's interesting, you're doing a sport like women's soccer where Texas is like any other sport, but women's soccer, no different. So deep with the talent pool they have. And also a lot of really good Power 5 and Group of 5 teams that they can play in the non-conference. So SFA, they go out, they play Rice in their first game, lose 7-0, and the coaches basically said we weren't going to back down. We wanted to play a really, really tough non-con and give ourselves a sense of that, what that's like to lose matches and lose to really good teams. I found it interesting that they played a 4-4 draw against Houston, who is one of the top 2 teams in the American. Likely, if you look at some of the bracketology, they'll probably get an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament, depending on how results go in their conference tournament. But Stephen F. Austin, I think they wanted to, like you talk about, Kendra, having resilience. I think it helps when you're one of these Texas schools and kind of learning more about the league, the fact that they're close in proximity to a lot of the big powerhouse women's soccer programs in the state. And it seems like the challenging themselves that way has paid a ton of dividends, because they come off a season last year where had a first-year coach. You're trying to, reestablish whatever identity of the program that he wants as a coach and bringing in new players. So, yeah, it seems like, and he was making the point now, you mentioned Eric earlier, coming from Iowa State. He's getting, he's getting emails from people that he would have loved to have had at Iowa State that he's easily able to recruit now at Stephen F. Austin. So it's not always just, Power 5 versus a mid-major conference. It's not really the same dynamic. And that's something I just, wasn't aware of coming into prepping for the tournament, that Stephen F. Austin, I mean, it's the real deal there, even though on paper, you might look at the pedigree and haven't had a ton of success historically, but they're playing with a lot of confidence, and they've got really, really good players on their side.
And Ben, with the 4 teams remaining, you mentioned the chip on the shoulder for Stephen F. Grand Canyon. That was the first time they've won. First time we've had divisions, but they had never won the regular season title in the WAC. Chris Sissel's had a lot of success in the WAC, but he has not won the tournament. And I'm sure that's got to be somewhat of an elephant on his back as well, or a monkey on his back, if I'm crossing my metaphors there, the elephant in the room. But Utah Valley is the one remaining team that has that confidence, that's been there. They won the tournament last year. Not only did they win the tournament, went to the NCAAs, beat number 25 Memphis in the first round, first ever NCAA win in any program for Utah Valley in Division I. So you think they might be, perhaps the team that thinks, of course, Chris LeMay told us that it's championship or bust for Utah Valley this year.
Right. I think you have to keep them the slight favorite at this point. Even obviously this is, for us at least as a recording, sight unseen on both Grand Canyon and Stephen F. Austin, but as we've talked about, we've seen this happen where that team who does not get the first round bye, it helps them out by getting their feet wet and getting a game under their belts. Utah Valley also, I mean, not fazed at all by the weather. I know we kind of started talking about that, and it looked right at home last night. Even I being based in Las Vegas, I'm as soft as it gets now with weather. So I'm freezing my tail off last night. It's like 45, not bad at all. And but they looked comfortable. They looked like they were playing with purpose. And yeah, you come off of a game, I don't know, and I was trying to look back, see the last time in a conference game, Utah Valley had given up 6 goals because they've played some really good non-conference teams, have been beaten up a bit in the past. I'm going back, I'm going to keep looking, Eric. I know you're like our unofficial WAC historian, but I couldn't find another instance where they gave up 6 goals in a conference loss. Certainly not in the Crystal Nay era, which is now in its 5th year. So with the way he's a very demanding coach. I mean, we saw a couple of times last night, maybe one bad pass that didn't result in anything, and he was up off the bench. Maybe, I don't know, he was maybe trying to keep himself warm, but he was really getting after his players, demanding a ton of excellence from them the whole 90 minutes. You get the sense like they really are a team on a mission, and that's not just because we're staying in the same hotel and we've seen them studying and doing their coursework in the lobby. I know everybody else is doing that, but the fact is they are a team with the championship pedigree, and they've been there. They've been to the tournament. I know they want to build off what they did last year, and they didn't view it as a shock that they beat Memphis. I mean, we can say that enough from talking with the coaching staff. They expected to be there and make a run. I will be really interested to see how the SFA, how they match up against them, because you have 2 coaches who I think are really aggressive minded. They want to push tempo, and it'll be kind of that clashing of styles. It's not like SFA is not just going to sit back, even though they just watched UVU score 6 goals. But in the end, Eric, I do think that's probably your slight favorite. I still think UVU, SFA, and I would say GCU, I still think those 3 have as good of a chance to win as any. Lamar, for as good of a story as it has been, it would surprise me to see them run the table, win 3 straight. But at this point, I mean, we know anything can happen. I just think those top 3 are probably your leaders in the clubhouse right now.
Well, you had mentioned the weather and both teams pushing tempo. It was raining, I think, the night before, the morning of, and so that field was soaked. It wasn't a turf field or anything. And so now that it's going to be nicer weather and dry up, how do you expect the speed of play on the pitch to increase?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was first off really impressed. Like Abilene Christian, it's sort of a shame. First time they're getting to host our tournament, and they didn't have a team in, which is always sort of a disappointment if you're that host school and you want to get to represent for the conference. But the facilities are outstanding, and the field it held up a lot better than I thought it would, Kendra, at least, especially in the first match when the rain had just stopped, and you had a few players slipping and sliding, but by no means did it look like, like Packers 49ers 96 divisional game, like mud bowl and everybody's sliding like 10 yards when they try to plant their foot. Like it was still really playable. So I don't expect it to be a big factor going forward. I mean, if anything, you watch both the speed that you see Utah Valley, GCU, and SFA. I think those 3 teams will certainly benefit, I would think, all of them from the drier conditions because they're able to press. But also keep in mind, Lamar, their coaches were telling us they had not played a single game in the rain all season. And that team, being in Beaumont, and I guess it makes a little bit of sense. But I know they were a little concerned, like what would happen if the pitch was super slick and their defenders are used to playing a certain way. So even though maybe the speed won't necessarily help them, the speed of the pitch, I also think they might have a little more confidence playing defensively that they'll won't have to think about that at all in the back of their minds. At least, I would think in this semifinal tomorrow.
Well, Ben, we want to thank you for taking some time out. I know you've been doing a lot of prep, did a great job on Wednesday. We look forward to hearing your call on Friday and then Sunday on ESPN Plus for the championship matches. And once again, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Always happy to. Thanks for having me.
Look forward to listening for the next couple matches.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for everybody for listening and watching the WAC podcast.
Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And check out our website at wacsports.com.